How's everybody doing? Good. I am Brian. I go by BDougieYo on Twitter. So my Twitter's on the bottom. So if you guys want to hashtag HTML and use me as well, maybe we can split a raffle prize. Or maybe not. So I'm actually here to talk about the quest for static and how we're basically moving towards static, which stay tuned. But before, I actually want to start to talk about pirates. You guys familiar with pirates?
Yes.
Okay, arg, cool. Well, I'm going to talk about pirate history. So bear with me, because it's going to be very brief history. Stede Bonnet. You guys ever heard this guy? Never heard of him? You've heard of him? Maybe you listened to This American Life this week, where I just completely lifted the story from. Stede Bonnet, back in the early 1700s, he was from Barbados, married with kids, and went through a midlife crisis and decided he was going to become a pirate. People just do that stuff. And so he became a pirate out of desperation. He's kind of wanted to do something different. Most of us buy Corvettes or get a new haircut. He became a pirate. He literally went down to the shipyard and had a ship built. Normally, pirates, when they become pirates, they actually start out of like some sort of tyranny or mutiny. This guy actually paid to be a pirate. You could almost say that he got a ship on sale. Oh. All right. I'm also a dad, so I apologize because this whole time I'm going to be doing dad jokes. Other thing that he also did was my child, yeah, for sure. But he doesn't really get most of my jokes. He's below me. He's actually shorter than me. Anyway, sorry. Let me move on. Talking about pirates. So he didn't really understand the economic model for pirates. He actually hired staff to be on a ship as pirates. That was very problematic because pirates should not have a salary. You should actually be hurting for money, and that's why you want to, kill and take over other ships and actually create mutiny. So he did everything super backwards. And I'm actually going to stop there on his story because I'm going to bring it up later because it's actually going to tie in. But I just want to start with another joke. I didn't realize I was going to tell like 3 jokes before I got to my first joke. But how do pirates know they are pirates? Does anybody want to? They think before they are. Cool. Why am I talking so much about pirates? So I'm actually from Tampa, Florida. It's the original Bay Area, so Tampa Bay. We are the home of the Buccaneers, and we know about pirates. And the reason we know about pirates is because we celebrate it once a year at this festival called Gasparilla, which literally the Buccaneers started in Tampa Bay and Gasparilla. And it's like once a year, all the Florida man jokes on Twitter come from this party once a year too as well. So just keep that in mind sometime this fall. The reason why the pirates actually went to Tampa Bay is because this is a map of hurricanes. Since the early 1800s until 2006 is when this map is actually plotted. That's how many hurricanes hit the southeastern portion of the country, and this is where Tampa is. So Buccaneers went to Tampa to actually hide out from hurricanes and tropical depressions. So Tampa Bay is actually a really awesome place. If you are into voting right-wing and you like beaches and getting leathery skin. So, awesome place. Definitely great place to retire. I like it because when I retire there, I'll know the street names. Because my, Alzheimer's, when it kicks in, I'll actually know. Anyway, sorry. Another bad joke. So, I'm talking about the quest for static, but before I actually jump into this, I actually want to kind of lay out the map. Because pirates, they're always searching for treasure, and our treasure is static websites. So let's talk about web history. So 1980s, Tim Berners-Lee actually created the World Wide Web. And at that time, the web was a series of tubes. Actually, it was a series of folders that held indexed HTMLs. So it tended to look like this. So you have an indexed HTML, and you have a folder like an about and a contact page. And the benefit of this is that websites are actually super small. They're actually pretty secure, and the speed-wise, it was actually pretty fast if you wanted to get to a website. The benefit was actually, the internet was actually pretty slow at the time, so you kind of had to stick to this model. The only problem with this is that it didn't really scale as much because websites, you had to go into all this weird folder structure to build that. So we kind of moved away from that eventually. But we started here where we wanted HTML, and we had sites and a series of folders, and the goal was really just to get content on a screen. And that's what we did, and we did that pretty well. We had a client that talked to servers, nothing too crazy, And because of that architecture, we have sites that could stay up forever. For like, even 11 years later, spacejam.com is still live and ready to go. It's like completely irrelevant. Maybe when LeBron James does Space Jam 2, if it ever is going to happen, then we'll be happy and maybe they'll upgrade this thing. But hopefully if they upgrade it, they'll keep to what kept this going on for 11 years. After HTML came CSS, and thanks to CSS, you now have sites like this. Yeah, this is like high-level CSS. This is actually today's Craigslist. Like, nothing's changed. It's actually amazing because also this page, it still works. And there's not much change. What's really funny is that this is the CSS for Craigslist. Yeah, that's like all the CSS. What's even funnier is that all the text area is actually bang important for making it gray. So they only have, 20 lines of CSS, but they have to do important. I don't understand. I don't know who writes CSS there, but I'm not trying to throw shade. I'm just really interested in how that works. So after CSS, then we have JavaScript. Eventually, everybody knows the story there. Well, I don't know. Everybody know that story? Well, I don't have time to actually go over it. But JavaScript came over later. And fast forwarding a little faster into the story, then we had all this Web 2.0 stuff happening, WordPress. Database actually lived within the same ecosystem of your client. It was madness, cats and dogs living together, amazing stuff. And the architecture got a little more complicated. But that didn't matter because at this time, we started getting broadband was around for a while, broadband became more of a household thing. I think around this time, my family got broadband, which was awesome. So even though sites were heavier, they were a little bit heavier, and the speed really didn't matter because the bandwidth, which was awesome. So, and I did mention the scale didn't work, but with WordPress, security became problematic eventually because you could basically be as secure as fast as you could update your WordPress site. So security is okay, but it's not okay as long as you don't keep up with it. Moving on, then we came over to all our monolithic site builders like Rails, Django, in addition to WordPress as already out there. And it just became more coupling in our databases and our clients to then come like an architecture like this, where we have a fully functional isomorphic rendered application, like from JavaScript, and it just became madness. So not only that happened, but then this happened. So now we have all these front-end frameworks that are doing all the stuff that our clients did so well in Craigslist and Space Jam. I want Space Jam back. But we have to get through all this cruft. And with that came also Node as well. And then, again, the isomorphic, universal, whatever that term is, became so in vogue that it became very hard to deal with. It became very expensive as well to try to host stuff. I host on a host that I won't name, but it cost me $7 a month to host a simple site. And I hosted the same another site on that same host. It cost me $28 because I didn't actually host my video elsewhere. So the bandwidth was basically just killing me in cost. I only paid it once a month, and I killed it. So we forgot what we were trying to get at. We had sites, we had content on the page. And the problem is we didn't actually keep up to date with that scale. You guys remember Twitter a couple years ago? Everybody got a mobile phone. Everybody got a Twitter account. Twitter couldn't keep up with it. It just couldn't scale. So they had to make a lot of infrastructure changes. Not a big deal. We can keep up with the times that way. But security, size, scale, and speed all became unobtainable as everything you can have in one package. You could have 3 of them, but you can have 4 of them. You could have 2 of them, but you can have all 4. So the question is, what are we doing? Like, what happened? Why is now everything, when you want to actually build a site, you go to choose a framework. You go and read a book, and you become a pirate. And it doesn't make sense because you can't just say I'm a pirate one day and expect the best. Like, you're going to have problems. So going back to Stede Bonnet, he actually was termed the Genetleman Pirate because he was literally an aristocrat that became a pirate. One thing I didn't mention as well is that on his ship, he built an entire library. So he can, while he's on sea, he can actually just read books, which is pretty cool, right? Except pirates can't read. So he was basically the anomaly of what a pirate wasn't. It got to the point where he would actually attack ships, and before attacking ships, he would ask questions of like, should I attack? What should we do? Didn't actually know what to do, and that's not very good when you're a captain. because then your shipmates or your crew that you're actually paying, they don't really care what you say. So that became very problematic where it got to the point where they attacked the Spanish Armada, and it was Armada. It's a very big thing. It's a fleet of ships, and they lost basically. And Stede Bonnet actually got injured and retreated to the Bahamas, where he met Edward Teach. Does anybody know Edward Teach? Yes. So Edward Teach, he was the embodiment of what a pirate actually is. He had a beard so black, and he used to actually, before attacking ships, he would put matchsticks in his beard and light them on fire, and then go attack like whoever they're trying to attack or take over ships. He did it so well that he was actually termed Blackbeard was his name. And because he was embodiment of a pirate and he was illiterate and he never experienced any aristocrat life, he actually took Stede Bonnet under his wing and taught him his ropes. So much that Stede Bonnet really didn't pick it up. So Stede Bonnet actually begged Blackbeard to help him. So Blackbeard said, okay, just stay on my ship, and I'll send my second in command on your ship. So Stede Bonnet's like, great, cool. I don't have to like really be a pirate, but I can kind of be a pirate under your wing. So he did that for a while, and he ended up learning how to be a pirate. But one thing I also wanted to mention is being a pirate is all about show. Like, you're not actually doing much. Blackbeard actually never killed anybody until like the last 10 years of his life. It's all about show, and it's all about the theatrics. So keep that in mind. So I just want to talk about real quick, going back to the web, talk about trends that have happened in the past couple years. One trend is the term microservice. These are Google trends, has picked up pace. So up before 2014, microservices wasn't like a term people were searching for. In addition to that, Git became a thing. It didn't become a thing, but it came more in vogue as a way to actually deploy and push your sites to a hosted provider. Another thing as well, JavaScript evolved into a new version after how many years did it take from ES5 to go to ES6? Well, that many years, it finally hit around just before 2015. So now we have ES 2015 is what they call it now. And we also had these problems too in between that time or coming up to the time where sites got larger, servers got bigger, and costs got insane. And there had to be some way to manage all this stuff. So I just wanted, Matt actually is speaking. He's the last talk. He might pick up on this a little bit. But Matt actually wrote a blog post on Smashing Magazine. And he noticed this trend. He's actually the one that I got some of these slides from. He actually noticed this trend of things changing. And he went to Smashing Magazine, wrote a blog post about how static is actually becoming more of a vogue. We're coming like a full circle back into static. And Smashing Magazine, has anybody ever read Smashing Magazine or heard of it? Cool. A couple of you guys. They have a conference that actually was a couple weeks ago. And they do it around the country as well. They're kind of the leaders in space for front-end development and talking about it. They have very, very awesome articles, including this one that's very detailed. So if you want to learn about progressive web apps as well after doing the Udacity course, you can follow up and catch up with that stuff. And Smashing had a problem where they had all these monolithic architectures, where they had different repos for these monoliths that had to stay consistent. And that consistency was actually killing them, to the point where the article actually struck a chord for them. So some of these actual numbers that I'm going to show come from performance.security.net. And this is what Smashing Magazine was before when it was on WordPress. And once Matt he actually scraped the site and put it up on a CDN instead, using a static site generator. And these are the numbers after. So keep in mind that red was bad, green is good. So these numbers, if you can't see them, these are like time to first byte and then first connection. This is not the end all of how to measure sites. There's a lot of other things you can measure sites with. Lighthouse is a very good tool to actually measure sites. Some other tools out there as well. But there was a huge improvement by just bundling the site down to static. So going back to Stede Bonnet actually, he got to the point where he kind of didn't want to be a pirate. He realized that Blackbeard was actually doing his work for him. And he just basically wanted to give up. His crew did not really respect him. And he actually was very vocal about the fact that his crew didn't respect him and that he wanted to not be a pirate, to the point where his crew couldn't even look him in the eye. So this thing happened with the actual United Kingdom. Their government were taking pardons for anybody who wanted to get out of the pirate life. So he actually accepted a pardon. He turned himself in, got a pardon, and went back to civilian life. And during that time, he just retreated back and kind of fell out, and no one really noticed. So I have one more joke. So this is a function that takes an argument. So why was the pirate undefined? Does anybody want to guess? No? Anybody right?
He was hard to find.
It's hard to find? Does anybody write JavaScript here? It's because they didn't return any args. That's why he was undefined. Poor Stede Bonnet. All right, so moving on to the next section. I want to talk about changing history and how history changed, but I just realized as I was writing the slide, you can't really change history. You can only add to it. So something that happened when we were in this mess of all these front-end frameworks, JavaScript becoming a thing, is that JavaScript demanded to be taken seriously. Once we got the event, especially when we got ES6, JavaScript started becoming more in vogue as a premier language to write a lot of different things. And because of that, and it kind of came out a lot of it as the front-end framework development, is that all these build tools started growing around the ecosystem. So we had like the Grunt, the Gulp, NPM, Webpack, Browserify, Rollup now, which is not pictured. And what you could do with these tools is what we were doing like 11, 15 years ago, which is you could bundle all your dynamically rendered JavaScript into something that could be hosted onto a static CDN, or a CDN that would host a static site, which is super powerful because you don't lose what we've worked so hard to gain, but now we can also host it very easily. So now the model looks like this, where you push your build tool, you run your command, and then you push it to a client, and it gets hosted on the browser. And then in tandem with that, you can have microservices like discuss for comments or auth0 for authentication. And in addition to that, you also have the growing of continuous integration. So you have like Travis and Circle. Are you guys familiar with these tools at all? Cool. So they're doing really great things in modern web development, which is awesome because you can also use these things to run your tests and then run your build command as well. Super awesome. So then we have this model where we're pushing to Git, running build commands to then trigger our Travis and then be hosted on a CDN. And now our output of the static site is actually being bundled smaller, so it's actually cheaper. You're not paying that $7 a month to host your blog or your $28, which is insane. Speaking of insane, the Genetleman Pirate, so his ship that he built this library on, he actually named the Revenge. That was the name of the ship. Coincidentally, after he retreated to become a civilian, he actually had some revenge. So what he found out is that once he left Blackbeard with his ship, Blackbeard actually marooned all of his crew onto an island and took his ship. And once Stede Bonnet learned about this, he was like, hey, that's not cool. Like, I gave you my ship my entire life, my revenge, and now I invoke revenge on you. So what he did is he went out, saved this. I don't know if he actually bought another ship. Probably did. Got another ship built, saved his crew, and then went after Blackbeard. And he actually never caught up to Blackbeard, but while he was trying to basically kill Blackbeard and actually get his revenge, he actually defeated 13 ships, and he threatened to burn out of town during this whole course of this reign. And then he also started beating his men. So which is funny because he had to go through all that to then become a real pirate, is what I'm trying to get at. And he went down in history because he actually did this for about a couple months until he got caught and then was hung. So it didn't last for very long. I'm not saying that this new modern web is going to last 3 months, but he had to go through all this to actually learn and understand, oh, this is what being a pirate is all about. Which is really cool because we also saw in tandem with the build tools being grown and being coming out of these front-end frameworks is that we have static site generators now. So we have static site generators that are built in all different types of languages that are literally bundling down the static, that are abstracted away from databases that are written in Markdown or written in CSS, and even with Gatsby, which is written in React. You can do a lot of amazing things. And these things are rolling out very, very quickly. Not just only 6 months ago, Nuxt.js, which is built on Vue, did anybody write Vue.js? Yeah, like we're barely getting in the Vue, and now we have a static site generator built in Vue. So the change of the ecosystem is here. And I think a lot of people that are on the forefront of it is people like Google. And I know it was mentioned that there's actually a course as well, and that the Chrome team is actually doing a really good job to push the term progressive web apps. And you guys familiar with progressive web apps? Cool. So if you're not, progressive web apps, like in a nutshell, it really comes down to the PRPL pattern, which is, these are acronyms like push and then first response and stuff like that. But it comes down to really having a site that is actually small enough to be hosted on a smartphone in India on 2G. So if you can do that, then you're doing really good things. And there's some other things, and I won't break down all these things, but also it really comes down to also minimum time to interactive. So how long is your customer rather looking to actually interact with your site? Very important. And it's very important, which I didn't bring up before. Did anybody come through like the Angular and the Backbone world and do front-end sites that way? There used to be like this weird thing whenever you would throw up like an Angular app and you'd have like a white screen for like half a second. Like that was super painful. And I remember actually in my second actual dev job, actually sitting around and talking and contemplating like, how can we improve this? And how can we like get rid of that white screen? Because that's super annoying. And we ended up coming to the answer, which is actually host our front end, our actual entry point of our web on a CDN. Which, anybody hosting on a CDN? Is that, anybody doing that? Highly recommend it. There's actually a lot of tools out there. They're almost trivial, the amount of them that are out there, so check them out. But we finally got to the point where we could have speed, security, scale, and size. So all the like the Ruby on Rails, the Django, all the build commands that you could generate a site in like minutes or build a blog in 15 minutes, you can do with static site generators and with Angular CLI. And then you can host on a CDN, and you can make sure your bundle is small with things like Webpack. So we came to this point where now we have build tools, we have static site generators. We are now in modern web development, like that we are here, and static is here to stay. So it really comes down to HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you have that, then you've really created the full circle of static. So we started with static, and we're still with static. And one thing that's actually really interesting is when you say static, people are like, oh, static. I'm not sure if anybody came here to really learn about how to do like static things and build spacejam.com. But what we're all doing with these JavaScript frameworks is really the Jamstack. So the company I work for, we're really into actually using this term instead of static, instead of like dynamically rendered or new dynamic or static on demand. Rather than say that, we actually use Jamstack, which is JavaScript APIs and markup, which is really cool because we have sites like the site that we have on the company I work for, which is Water for the People. This site that actually takes in donations and actually literally gets water to people. So when they have campaigns, they can't have their fail whale show up and their site be DDoS'd or because of their customers actually literally viewing their site, just viewing the site. It has to be up all the time for key moments. And they build their project on Middleman, which is a static site generator. And their backend is actually powered by a tool called Contentful, which powers their API, and also hosted on GitHub. And because of that, they get a lot of greens for first time to byte because they're hosted on a CDN. Another tool, Kento. Does anybody use Kento? So the Mozilla team is similar to Firebase. It's a document store in JSON. Kento is another team that does that. They actually use Elm and Pelican as a static site generator, also OAuth for login, and Pusher. They make sure you have updates and notifications, hosted on GitHub. That's their first time to byte. Has anybody ever seen Star Wars a couple years ago when it came out? So Spiro, they made the BB-8, the droid. When they launched, like the weekend before, or a couple of weekends before, the official launch before the actual movie came out, they built their site on Angular, Sass, used Grunt, Vero for their API, Contentful as well, in tandem with Contentful. And this is what they got too. And imagine like an actual company talking about Star Wars and selling a little droid that everybody wanted to get at one time. They didn't have to worry about their site going down. It reminds me of the Indiegogo. It was a really good talk at RailsConf last year where the guy who had the potato salad Indiegogo and basically DDoS'd the entire Indiegogo site because everybody wanted to get on this potato salad craze and like give $2 to hopefully get potato salad. If you guys don't remember that, you should just Google it. It's super awesome. They actually switched their front end to a static site because of that problem. So all their entry pages for Indiegogo campaigns are now static sites. One more is at netlify.com, the place I work at. We use Hugo, Gulp, Webpack in tandem, Gulp and Webpack in tandem, as well as NPM. We love building stuff, so we use all the build commands and post CSS. And this is what we have as our first time to byte. So highly recommend if you guys are not bundling the static, really look into it, because I think it's the future. It's the way to go. I mean, it's not the future. It's actually the now. It's what's at current. I say all this. We have a meetup next Tuesday called Jamstack SF, where we talk about all this stuff as well. So if you can't wait until next month for another HTML5 meetup, there's a meetup next Tuesday you should definitely go to. I host an actual podcast called Jamstack Radio as well, where we talk about all this stuff. So if you guys are interested in stuff and you want to be on the podcast, just hit me up at BWO on Twitter. I didn't realize that the people who made this was actually going to talk about it here, but Udacity has a course about progressive web apps. Highly recommend checking it out. Also, SFHTML has a Pirate Day, ARG. I wonder if they're going to do it this fall. They should talk about it later. And finally, have you heard any pirate jokes? Any good pirate jokes? No? Well, neither have I. BWO on Twitter. Thank you, guys.